Man, I wanna just start a project. That'll be some mischief. But I also wanted to get views and get a good point across. But how would I do that for the aisle here? Because there's been not so many functions as a... Well, that'll work. Why is Magyarosaurus not liked? I remember liking the design originally, as I've always been a fan of unique looking creatures, especially Hadrosaurus, sauropods, and other unique dinosaurs. So seeing that as they were adding a smaller sauropod, I was stoked to play it, or the idea of playing it. I even made an animated green screen effect of the little guy, which pretty cool, huh? But when I went to talk about it on the Isle official Discord in their general chats, I was quickly told to hush hush or I risk a whole frickin' riot, which I did not really see the use of at the time, so that led me to some more questions. Why is Magyarosaurus not liked? And how it could be a crap playable? And how could it be a good playable? I would describe what Magyarosaurus was like in real life back into the Cretaceous. However, plenty of enough folks have covered that already. So, I'll just point out to my friend Zagger's video initially covering Magyarosaurus. He gives a good description of what it was and what it was like. So feel free to give that a check out. As while the Isle is classified as a dinosaur survival game, Magyarosaurus is not an actual dinosaur, at least the one in the Isle. It is an amalgamation of several different attributes and traits, which by itself would not be unusual, as we have creatures like Herrerasaurus in the game, or Bipiosaurus, being far from what they originally were in the Mesozoic. Though with the general consensus at the time of announcing Magyarosaurus, there were better sauropods to use, which people felt dampened its perception. Some examples that I recall being Shunosaurus, Saltosaurus, and Amargasaurus. A second factor for its controversy being its poisonous ability due to its diet, which will negatively impact most, if not all, of the roster of playables, either by taking a bite or eating it. I will touch more on this later on in the video, though another series of factors that most people focused on was its feasibility. Magyarosaurus and its feasibility. In this section, I'll be touching on 3 traits and attributes that may impact how well Magyarosaurus is welcomed in the Isle. These being its movement, its being able to defend itself, and its poison. So I'll be going through those in descending order. Starting off with speed, I feel like I need to discuss this matter, as it is skipped over so much. Speed. Many people view sauropods as slow, lumbering behemoths. Well, not all sauropods were like that, as Amargasaurus, as listed earlier, had studies done and was thought to be able to run about 30 to 31 miles per hour, or about the speed of a white rhino. Honestly, it's worded either way from the articles I've seen. While it is true the original Magyarosaurus could not achieve these speeds, this is not the original Magyarosaurus, I'd like to reiterate. The true speed of Magy is not known for the game currently, though there were several statements made that it was faster than Allo, which I honestly view as a half-truth, as regular Allo's speed is meant to be an endurance hunter, not its sprint speed. I view that they just said it's faster than Allo, stating its base speed, not its ambush. Wanted to get that out of the way, as that caused a whole bunch of mischief in the community. People thought, there's no way Magy could be faster than one of the fastest creatures in the island. Which, they were right. It wouldn't. I view it to be faster than its regular sprint speed. but from how it was conveyed, it caused all sorts of issues, created more drama than it needed to, and it's just how they provide details in the game that can cause whole havocs. But that ran aside, I feel like Magyarosaurus would be able to run at least as fast as a Tenno. For its viable defense, Magyarosaurus has some built-in side armor, also known as dermal scutes. And it's shown in the reference art for this creature that these scutes can cause damage back, if not bleed back, to the predators or animals that attack it. I feel like this could be a useful trait in it for protecting itself from adversaries, but its main defense for those that are larger should always be fleeing, as its scutes would provide some protection, but it's no Stegosaurus. That scute should only provide up to a certain amount of resistance. Feasibility for poison. This is one of the most polarizing aspects of this creature, which I agree for the most part, if it is not handled properly. Evolutionarily speaking, it is a very expensive King's Gambit of a trait, as the creature who is poisonous has to be either ingested or wounded, as there are creatures that are poisonous to some, but certain predators have evolved resistance to these poisons, making it more vulnerable to these attacks from these specific creatures, such as certain salamanders in Europe. Snakes have developed a resistance, and now they eat those salamanders. Tasty. But with their diet seems to be a good contributor to this matter. But now, I can get to the fun section of this matter. Brainstorming. In this section, I'm going to be looking at how a Magyarosaurus could have a fun but reasonable niche in the Isle player ecosystem. I'll be going down in descending order as same as the previous section, starting with movement, which I can take a bit of inspiration from an animal that lived in a very competitive habitat. One that descended from ancestors who fled from large predatory Notosuchian survivors that evolved into Sebecids after the Cretaceous. It lived in an environment with large, intelligent feathered predators that patrolled the grasslands that it lived, and lived in an environment up until relatively recently with large saber-toothed cats. This creature being Macrauchenia. The image on screen you might not recognize this. You are probably used to the older trunk depictions. Let me just grab that real quick. And there we go. And while using this as a comparison may seem strange at first, until you look at the features of the Isle Magy like it was a real animal. It would be what was called convergent evolution, where separate animals happen upon the same qualities and strategies, such as therizinosaurs and ground sloths, both using their grasping arms to gather food. And from what the Isle devs had showcased, is that the Isle Magy was capable of decent speed and excellent turning. And Macrauchenia has been scientifically proven to use its strange build and feet to be able to outmaneuver advanced predators such as Smilodon populator, canids, and bears. And with the Isle Magy being made to be maybe a little larger than Macrauchenia, I've seen several comparisons about the same size, I feel this could be a feasible comparison. Not to mention the traits that would already be in Magyar's favor, such as hollow bones, advanced respiratory systems similar to that of other dinosaurs, rigid tough skin and bones to support great stresses of movement that it inherited from its larger sauropod ancestors, a long neck and tail that could be used for counterbalancing, along with strong tendons. All of that could probably help out Magy in the long run, if we're talking scientific feasibility. This is a game, so I'm just speaking for fun here, though. So Magy being able to keep speed at minimum of a horse, maybe a little faster than Tenno, I deem that as not too infeasible for me. Though with it being aimed at living in a largely debris-filled environment of forest and jungle in the Isle, I would like to see probably it having an auto vault feature or being able to run straight over these obstacles such as logs, which might be able to be a saving grace if you're in a chase. Viable defense. Some ways of Magy being able to defend itself is a good thing to probably talk about. Well, besides its movement. With it having scutes and tough skin from being part of the sauropod clade, I think up until the middle point of the neck could deal normal damage and not headshot damage, that being saved for the front half of the neck, which could be fairly balanced out as the neck is a very large, vulnerable hitbox, but still allowing for skilled gameplay in aiming for the smaller part of the body to do extra damage, and the Magyarosaurus trying to pivot and use its abilities to defend itself, such as flipping over dinosaurs using its large neck. And with the armored scutes on its shoulder, that should allow for resisted damage, maybe to a lesser degree, like Diabloceratops or Packy, taking resisted damage to the head hitbox, but instead of damage resistance to that degree, I feel like it could have lesser damage resistance but bleed on contact, while protecting up to a certain damage threshold. Let's say, for example, it takes 100 damage to its shoulder. That damage could probably be halved to 50 and cause some bleed back. But if damage up to 150 were to hit its shoulder, it would only resist 50 damage still, but this time it would take 100 damage. So it can only limit up to, let's say, 50 damage on that spot. And while I think it's funny to think of Magy throwing a poor helpless soul like in its concept art, I don't think we should talk about that in a moment. That is incredibly situational, and unless you're planning on using a Dryosaurus as a sort of ammunition, or a group of Dryosaurus for that matter, I think that is going to be very situational. But for this last subject, I want to touch on its tail. As while Magy is relatively fast, enough to escape most larger predators outside of an ambush, for the more raptor-sized threats, Magy being able to quickly build up speed for a shoulder neck bash could be useful, like it's seen in its art, though having its tail as a feasible defense option would be good too. Maybe even while moving, as not many creatures can swing their tail when they're moving in the game. So if it's running away from a raptor and it manages to just slap in, it could probably use a shoulder bash and then stomp on whatever foe it is facing, if it's safe to do so. Either that or just leave them sort of stunned for breath. Need them to get up and out of the stun before they continue chase. Viable poison. In order to lean into the diet system and how diets are specifically built, the Isle devs could use carbohydrates to induce vomiting, lipids to impair vision or scent, and proteins to do pure damage over time for those that either eat their meat or take a bite out of them. The more diets in one, the more stronger they'd be. A perfect diet would be a nice mix of all of the above. 2 carbohydrates, they'd be vomiting a fair amount, and so on and so forth with lipids and protein. Though the weight of the targets would impact how effective this is. Let's say a target is about as heavy as Magy, it'd be fairly effective. If a target was smaller than Magy, it would be incredibly effective. If it was bigger than Magy, not very effective at all. Though the obvious outlier would be Serato, which is a walking garbage can. He could eat anything in the aisle right now. But yeah, some of the ideas I threw out in my initial script, I did not realize that they'd been thrown out before. But I hope you all enjoyed me throwing ideas at the wall, hoping to see something stick. I look forward to more unique playables and hope this promotes further brainstorming or making change by getting dev attention. And if that doesn't work, I hope it was worth at least a little laugh. Just the weird guy giving content here. And if you did like this type of content, please let me know. I will try to get more like it out on the regular basis. I got a few plans coming out. But all you fine feathered folk, have a fantastic day. And see you in the next one. I would make a description of what the real Magyarosaurus was,